everyone, Mitch from Pick Dogs here with Chris and Ron. It is week one of the 2024 college football season. We had week 0, a lot of dogs coming in, but we didn't do a show for them. And I think, just like anything else for me, week 1, week 2, week 3, these are all going to be tough ones for me, but I'm going to do the best I can. Chris, welcome back for another season of college football here at Pick Dogs.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't do the week 0 show like you said, but still have plenty to talk about for week 1. The preparation that we had in the off season finally going to come to pay off here. So I'm excited to break it down with you guys this year.
Ron, welcome back. We had a good time last year. Certainly had a lot more traction than we did our first year. We're hoping to get even more traction this year as we change formats a little bit, but I think you guys are going to really like it. Ron, what are you thinking for this year's college football season?
Yeah, we got a new look show, but we also got a new look college football with the expanded playoff and, of course, all the conference realignments. So it's going to be a new season here. It's going to be exciting, and I can't wait.
Yep, we got a lot to talk about today. Just keep in mind that I debated going back and forth, and maybe we'll change it in the coming weeks, depending on what the schedules look like. I debated doing 2 separate videos, one of the weekday games and one of the weekend games, especially this weekend where you have, where it expands on. But instead, I just decided to do one video for the entire thing. But remember, we have timestamps in the description. Just click on the timestamp. If you're watching it on a day and the games are already over and you don't want to watch what we had to say about it, that's fine. Or if you want to just see a specific game, just click on the timestamps and we'll do it. And like I said, it's just week 1 of the college football season. We're open to suggestions if you have any, but the biggest suggestion, let's win and let's get started. Let's head to our first game on the slate, and that is in Minnesota, where the Minnesota Golden Gophers hosting North Carolina in an Big Ten versus ACC matchup. At the time of shooting this video, Minnesota a mild favorite here. The total set at around in the 50.5 range. Chris, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one. Tricky matchup. Trying to see what's going to come out of North Carolina in year 1 without Drake May, but Max Johnson, not much of an upgrade, if an upgrade at all. Minnesota relied heavily on their defense last year, but I do think they got a big upgrade at quarterback with the Ethan Kaliakmanis transferring out and Max Bronsford coming in from New Hampshire. I think they're going to be able to move the ball a lot easier this time around. I think that Minnesota gets the job done. I'm taking Minnesota at home in this one.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in this game. I think that's why you see a pretty short spread there. I'm looking more towards the total. I like the under. I think Minnesota's offense is going to be improved. I think, especially at the quarterback position. Brosmer, basically a FCS Heisman level quarterback last year. We've seen guys step up from FCS to FBS and play just as well. Bailey Zappi, who got cut today, is an example of that. But I think Minnesota's going to focus on their ground game. They have a good offensive line going into the year, good running back group. I think North Carolina, the quarterback question marks are there. I'm not really the biggest Max Johnson guy. So I think both offenses kind of slow to start the season. I like the under.
For me, I just think what we have here are 2, coaches that kind of have been there and done that. And I think you expect to see somewhat of a conservative game plan out of PJ Fleck. He is a clock milker, as they say, and I think he's going to try and shorten this game. And with the new, with the clock rules the way they are, I could see that, Minnesota really shortening the game in this one. I think Minnesota does have a big edge at quarterback. I don't think North Carolina has any drop off at all with Drake May and to Max Johnson. And I have no high opinion whatsoever of Max Johnson, a guy who just simply gets beat out at quarterback at every school he's ever been to. North Carolina has a bit of a quarterback controversy and quandary there. If you got 3 guys competing for one quarterback spot, that means you have no good quarterbacks. And I'll tell you, I just think Minnesota getting points at home, start the season, probably where I want to be. Doesn't look like to be one of the strongest plays on the board for me, but it's where my money's going to be at for this one. Next, we head on out to Boulder, Colorado, where the Colorado Buffaloes host North Dakota State. Of course, Colorado last year, one of the big names in the early season, making a lot of noise, did not finish the season all that strong. Coach Prime looking to shore up some of the areas where he was suffering. And of course, Sanders, a Heisman quarterback at QB. Chris, what do you think of this one?
Yeah, the Buffs last year were all bark, no bite, and I think that's kind of what what Deion Sanders has done this year as well. Kind of put his foot in his mouth with this first matchup, saying you need a win, and you go out and schedule an FCS powerhouse in North Dakota State that's won 9 titles since 2011. The Buffs can't move the football on the ground. They only averaged 2.3 yards per carry last year, and North Dakota State struggled against teams that ran the football well. They have a great secondary. Don't get me wrong, Colorado's going to be able to move the ball, but I think North Dakota State can match them. I think North Dakota State is live in this game. I'm taking North Dakota State in the points with a sprinkle on the money line.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, I don't know how many times me and Chris are going to agree this season, but this is one of those rare opportunities. I like North Dakota State as well. I think I completely agree with what he said. Colorado had the big issues with the ground game, with the offensive line. They averaged just under 70 yards per game on the ground. It's not going to get it done at any conference, at any level in college football. And while their offensive line looks to be improved, it's still very inexperienced. They have the big names. They got Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, of course, Coach Prime. But the lines are where I really have the issue with this team. And I think North Dakota State, they have been an FCS powerhouse the last decade plus. They can step up and play a team like Colorado. I think it's going to be a close one, and I would sprinkle on the Bison money line.
I'm with you guys on this one as well. I like North Dakota State in this one. I also think a legitimate shot on the money line, and I'm going to be primarily on this game. I just think that Colorado, a lot of pieces that have not really played together, and the guys that did play together last year, a lot of holes. Shedeur Sanders spent a lot of time on his back last year when he dropped back to pass. And you have a team like North Dakota State, which comes from the lower division, but has dominated there and has stepped up in these spots over the years. I mean, this is their chance at the big boys to say that they could play at this level, and a lot of those players believing they could play at this level, and a lot of these players from North Dakota State, some of the best spotlight that they're going to get on them when it comes to the NFL draft. And of course, the Bison, the team that's put in plenty of players into the NFL as well. I like North Dakota State in this one as well. For our next game, we head to Norman, Oklahoma, where the Oklahoma Sooners take on Temple. This is Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Sooners a big favorite in this one, over 6 touchdowns. The total set at 59, so it's one of those things where it is really set up to be a one-sided game. Ron, what are you thinking for this one?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a one-sided game, and these big favorites in early season college football have done pretty well, both obviously straight up, but against the spread as well. And Oklahoma, will they have as much of a potent offense as last year? Probably not, but I still think they do plenty of scoring in this game early and late. Temple, last year was a disaster for him, and that was with E.J. Warner at quarterback, who I think he's a pretty good quarterback option. Now you lose him. I think there's a ton of question marks at quarterback, offensively in general. I think your defense is, just as weak as it was last year. I think it's a one-sided blowout, and I'll lay the points. Even though it's a ton of points, I'll lay them with the Sooners.
I struggle to lay this many points, especially early season in college football, especially when we saw in week 0 every single dog covered in week 0. But it's also tough to go against the Sooners at home, especially with a lot to prove. This is a team that traditionally loves to whoop it up on the little guys. They don't always get a chance to do that, and they have left themselves open to the backdoor cover. It's probably going to take a shutout by Venables' defense to do it here, but I do see a possibility of a 56-52 type game, or even 52-3, which also would get it done in this spot. I just think the Sooners too much, the Owls just too little. Not a game I love because I'm not going to be laying 42.5 points, but I'll have to roll with the Sooners. Chris?
Yeah, I kind of think I'm in the same boat. I don't love playing 42.5, but I don't see any other way to go. The Owls had just 5 takeaways defensively last season. So just to go to what Ron said, the defense is just abysmal for the Owls. And I think this is just one of those spots where, the Sooners have 1 or 2 games in the non-conference every year where they just don't take their foot off the gas. And I think this is going to be sort of a tune-up spot for Jackson Arnold to really get his feet wet. And I just don't think the Owls are going to have an answer here. This, like you said, Mitch, feels like one of those 59-0 kind of games. So I'll reluctantly lay the points with Oklahoma here.
Looks like we're all in agreement here on Oklahoma, even though none of us really like laying this many points. That's for sure. Next up, we've got Michigan State hosting Florida Atlantic in this one. Michigan State, a pretty large favorite in this game, despite really not having a lot of success in recent years. Florida Atlantic, we've seen them many times over in these step-up spots in the early season. Most of the time, they've gotten stepped on. Chris, what do you think in this one?
Yeah, I think this is a spot where FAU gets stepped on. I think there's just too many question marks for me with FAU to think that they'll be able to compete here. Michigan State starts the Jonathan Smith era. Smith coming over from Oregon State. He's brought some pieces with him. And this is kind of what Jonathan Smith has done. He did it with Oregon State, where it took him from a one-win team to 3 straight bowl games over the last 3 years. He takes a team that's in a little bit of flux and just, makes chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what. And I think that he does that here in the opener for Michigan State. I think Sparty wins this one by 17 to 21 points. I'm going to go with Michigan State in this one.
Ron?
Yeah, I do agree with you on Michigan State, but I also like the under. I just don't think that FAU does too much offensively here. I think the Spartans' defense is revamped. Cam Fancher, now quarterback for FAU, really wasn't he was a quarterback at Marshall last year. Marshall didn't have a great offensive season. He wasn't his best. I really think FAU is going to struggle to score any points in this one. I'm going to take Michigan State and the under.
I'm going to roll with Florida Atlantic in this game. I'm going to take the points. Michigan State just has not had a lot of success in recent years, and while it is important for them to get off to a hot start, Florida Atlantic is really a building, college in general in their athletic programs. We've seen the Owls in college basketball really take a step forward, and we've seen them in college football in recent years have some pretty big name head coaches. I'm not sure if they get across the finish line in this one, but this is actually an easier spot than some of those big names they've taken on in recent years, like Oklahoma. I'm going to take Florida Atlantic. I think they've been waiting for a shot like this. I think they'll have a shot to pull off the upset. I'm not quite sure that they get there. So we are in disagreement on this one, as Ron and Chris both looking at Michigan State. I'm going to take a shot with the Florida Atlantic Owls plus the 2 touchdowns. Next up, we've got Wisconsin taking on Western Michigan. And, this is an interesting one for me because as a Miami fan, Tyler Van Dyke taking over as the Wisconsin quarterback. Western Michigan returns a lot of starters from a team that didn't play very well last year. But I'll tell you what, I think that, Luke Fickell, what we've seen from him in the Big Ten, as a Big Ten coach, he really hasn't been the best. We saw him at Ohio State as a kind of a fill-in when Jim Tressel was suspended, and then we saw him here at Wisconsin, and he did not do such a great job there last year. He did, once again, transfer quarterback. Didn't really do it. And I saw Van Dyke at Miami. I have very little faith in him. I think Western Michigan goes in there and gives Wisconsin fits. Wisconsin, a team that generally struggles in the early season. We saw Washington State go in there and bust them up a couple of years ago. Wouldn't be surprised if Western Michigan gives them fits in this one. Chris?
Yeah, I'm looking at the under 57 in this one. I think this is going to be just a lower scoring game, even if it's a beatdown from Wisconsin or if Western Michigan competes here. I think it's just going to be low scoring. That for me, like you said, there's question marks with Tyler Van Dyke. Is he going to be able to produce for the Badgers? The Broncos, they have Hayden Wolf at quarterback. He's always capable of, keeping his team in the game. But for me, 57 just seems too high for this matchup. I'm going to go with the under 57 in this one.
Ron?
Yeah, early season, especially week 1, I'm not usually looking at too many big-time upsets, but for me, if there was a big-time upset in week 1, this is one I'm looking at. I think there's value on the money line of Western Michigan, but I'm taking points just in case. I just look at this Western Michigan team from a year ago, very inexperienced, a new head coach in Lance Taylor. They made so many mental mistakes early in the season. We look at the game at Syracuse, at Iowa. They put up some yards. They were able to move the ball, but so many flags, personal fouls, turnovers, dumb decisions hurt them, and that's what happened the rest of the season. Now they're more experienced. You get the second year of Taylor. I like the running game with Buckley. I think Wolf's a solid quarterback option. I think that this offense is going to be a lot better. I think the defense is going to be a lot better. Wisconsin, there's question marks there. I'm not a fan of Van Dyke either, quarterback. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game, and I think Western Michigan covers, and I'd sprinkle a little bit on that money line for a big-time upset.
Yeah, we all know the Badgers, once they get rolling downhill, you don't want to be on the business end of that. But I think if Western Michigan can make an early stand out there, maybe force a turnover or two, this game could get very interesting. We close out Friday night action as we head to Palo Alto as the ACC's newest member, the Stanford Cardinal, hosts the TCU Horned Frogs a year removed from playing in the national championship game. You know, this is a different look. Of course, last year in the early season, it was Sonny Dykes Horned Frogs getting upset by Colorado. We'll have to see how they handle the opener this year. Ron, what's your take here?
I think the TCU defense is a lot better. I could argue it's the best defense that Sonny Dykes has had going into this year. So I think we see a lower scoring game, honestly. The total's really steep at 60. And, we know Stanford's defense was miserable last year, but I think it's also improved quite a bit. They are more experienced defensively. I'm looking at the under. Right now, not my favorite game on the board, but I'll take a deeper look as the week goes on.
Not my favorite game on the board yet either at this point, but I'll tell you what, it's not my least favorite either, as I think the Horned Frogs are going to use the motivation of last year's slip-up against Colorado, a game where they scored a ton of points. I mean, in hindsight, in that game, it really came down to, I think it was like a missed fourth down by them and a conversion by Colorado was really the difference in a game that was actually a track meet, but it got a lot more notoriety because of the Colorado win. Of course, this year the Frogs on the road, but one thing that we know about TCU, these guys always quietly loaded with talent and putting together two bad, years in a row or two bad starts in a row. Not something that they do. And Sonny Dykes, I mean, this is a guy, coached the team to the national championship out of nowhere just a year ago. I think Stanford will be improving as time goes on. I think it'll be interesting to see the way an ACC schedule works out for them, playing a lot of games on the East Coast. But right now for this one, I like TCU. I just think they're the more talented team. I think they just have more raw talent than Stanford does. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the over here. For me, these are just two teams that were top 25 in pace of play last year. TCU obviously has the more talented team with Josh Hoover coming at quarterback. They have a lot of returning pieces. But Stanford, they got Ashton Daniels back as well. They have one of the best wide receivers, in my opinion, in the country, in Elikaya Minor. I think this is going to be a back and forth matchup, at least for the first maybe quarter or so. And then even if TCU pulls away and blows them out, I still think this is going to be a high scoring game. I got the over between TCU and Stanford.
Chris, you don't have any concerns about the clock and like what we saw in week one, with the unders and the way the clock moved in those games?
Yeah, I still do have a little bit of concern. I think taking overs, I rarely take overs to begin with, but, the clock rules were the same last year. And, we still, like I said, saw these two teams that were very fast-paced last year. A fast pace is what Troy Taylor did even with his time at Sacramento State. Sonny Dykes likes to push the pace as well. So for me, even with the clock rules, I still think that we're going to get some points this one just based on how many plays we see run.
I mean, I could see it, but the thing is, having Stanford involved in a game that you're asking for just south of 9 touchdowns just seems a pretty steep ask in my book. I'm not willing to stick my neck out on the under, but I'll criticize your over pick. That's how I roll. Anyways, move on. We move on, and of course, now it's my favorite day of the week during my favorite time of the year. It is College Football Saturday, and we kick it off with a beauty from Atlanta, where the Georgia Bulldogs take on the Clemson Tigers. It is teams that have won a host of national championships over the last several years. Neither of these teams too shy in the trophy case department, and of course, plenty of Heisman trophies and all kinds of other good stuff going on in that trophy case as well. Georgia Bulldogs, of course, did not make the college football playoff last year. Neither did Clemson. It was a rare year for both of these teams. Do either or both get back, and are they ready to roll? Ron, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, I think these are two programs that this season will be playing with a chip on their shoulder, but I think especially Georgia. I think Georgia, talent-wise, definitely deserved to be in the playoff. Resume-wise, maybe a different story. But we saw in the bowl game, 63-3 final score over Florida State. I think Georgia's the real deal this year. Now, they have a lot of players that are either injured, suspended. There's some question marks there. I still think they have enough to win this game going away. I don't really trust Klubnik at quarterback. I think Clemson's got its, world-renowned defense yet again this year, but is it going to be enough for 4 quarters against Georgia? I don't think so. I'm going to lay the points with the Bulldogs.
Kirby Smart is a guy that, really carries a chip on his shoulder at all times. I mean, remember the rant he went on after beating up on TCU about how they were disrespected all season long, even though they were never really lower than number 2 in the polls the entire season. The thing is that Clemson, while Dabo Swinney isn't a big fan of the transfer portal, he still is one of the top recruiters in the game, and they do have a lot of talent on this team. And Klubnik, he was a top-tier talent coming into Clemson as well when he first came in. And, maybe it takes him a couple of years to get things moving. I think that Georgia does have the edge here. I think they're going to have somewhat of a home field advantage, even though the game is considered a neutral site. But I do think that Clemson has the talent to surprise some people and hang with them. And these are the games in college football that end up being just a little tighter than everybody thinks, and they make them exciting. Of course, I said the same thing about Oregon before when they played Georgia, and Georgia absolutely, I think they just scored again on them. But I'm gonna roll with Clemson in this one. I'm gonna take that healthy 13 points. Chris?
Yeah, I'm gonna roll with Georgia here. I'm taking a believe it when I see it approach with Cade Klubnik. I had Clemson in the opener last year against Duke, and they laid an egg. And now you got Georgia, like you guys were saying, with a chip on their shoulder, coming in with some fight. And I think that I just don't know if Clemson, for me, is going to be able to match them for a full 60 minutes. I think it's just one of those games where I think it's going to be competitive early. I think you're going to see a couple shots traded back and forth, but a couple key turnovers late just has Georgia pulling away. I think they win this one by 2 touchdowns, maybe 17, like a 38-21 kind of game. So give me Georgia here, laying the 2 touchdowns.
I just think Clemson across the board getting the short end of the stick for most people. This is a team that puts a lot of players in the NFL, a lot of first-round talent into the NFL, and I think they're going to surprise some people. I think the game is going to be hard-hitting and competitive, a lot better game than most people think. But definitely, great way to start the first real college football Saturday of the season. Next up, we head to Vandy, where the Vanderbilt Commodores try and make a statement as part of the SEC up against Virginia Tech from the ACC. The SEC always claims dominance, but when you add up, who won the conference games, this one's going to count just as much as that Georgia Clemson matchup in an ACC-SEC matchup. Chris, does Vandy make a move forward this year? That's what it's really going to take.
Yeah, I think they do. I don't know if it's going to be in week 1. I do lean towards Virginia Tech, but I really like the over here. Virginia Tech put up some points in the Military Bowl last year. Kyron Drones back at quarterback. I want to see him increase that completion percentage, but he can move the ball on the ground. He's able to put up touchdowns in bunches. But Vandy got Diego Pavia from New Mexico State, dual threat himself. He was really exciting for the Aggies last year. Tim Beck coming over from New Mexico State as well. So I think Vandy's going to be a little bit more exciting this year. I think we're going to get some points in bunches in the opener. Even if one side were to pull away over the course of the second half, I still think we're getting a high-scoring game. So I'm going to take the over, lean towards Virginia Tech as well.
Ron?
Yeah, this is a game where if I were taking Vanderbilt, I would look in the first half of the game. I think by the end of it, though, by 4 quarters, I think Virginia Tech's just going to be too much on both sides of the ball, especially offensively. I think they have the better quarterback play, skill position players offensively. And I could see an over, but I just think by the end of this game, Hokies find a couple of touchdowns late to dress it up and cover the number.
I like Virginia Tech as well. I think with Vandy, I agree with you guys. I think they're going to be an improved team. They're going to be a better team. And of course, they're an SEC team. But at the same day, it's still Vandy. And I think, 13 is a big number to be laying this early in the season on the road for a team like Virginia Tech, who hasn't necessarily stood up to the, to where we're used to seeing them. And maybe part of it is that we're still remembering Frank Beamer, coaching this team, who was, quietly one of the greatest college football coaches of all time. But like Chris said, in the Military Bowl, we saw Virginia Tech and the team that they could possibly be. I don't think it's going to take much more of that to blow Vandy out of the building in this one. Vandy seems to find a lot of problems early in the season almost every single year. I think they find those problems again this year. So, in another ACC-SEC matchup, should be a fun day at the office to get things started. If you're watching on multiple TVs like I am, I'm sure you'll have this one on. Next up, we head to a regional rivalry game, and this one should be a doozy. Big 10 versus Big 12 matchup as West Virginia hosts Penn State. Boy, I've been to West Virginia for a few games. I can only hope, well, they've matured as a community. At least that's for the Penn State fans. I think the West Virginia fans wouldn't want it any other way. Ron, this should be a beauty.
This should be a great game. And, Penn State, this is a team that last year, when it was put to the test, it folded in a lot of these step-up games. I mean, what was their most impressive win last year? At Maryland in a blowout. But when they played Ohio State, when they played Michigan, when they played Ole Miss, they lost. And I think you laying this many points against a West Virginia team that was solid last year offensively, ran the football really well, had some of the best offensive line play in all college football. I like Garrett Green at quarterback. This is just too many points for me. I think West Virginia is a live dog.
I'm with you on that one. I think West Virginia is a live dog for the outright at home, and I think that Penn State does come in overrated. I think what we saw last year from Penn State, at least early in the season, as they were starting to build up and and the hype train started to get, all aboard on the hype train, I think what happened was we saw a lot of Penn State touchdowns in the last minute of a game to cover the spread to get a few of us out there pretty excited. I happened to be on the right side of a few of them, but I felt bad most of the game, like I had picked the wrong team. And I'll tell you what, laying this many points on the road to start the season, more than a touchdown, at a West Virginia team, which is, I think, a little bit too underrated, and a Penn State team, a little bit too overrated. I'm going to roll with the points with West Virginia. I'm with Ron, though. It's not going to take much to get me onto the money line. Chris?
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Sweep it. I'm taking West Virginia the points as well. Put a little bit on the money line. I think West Virginia is really live here. I think Drew Aller is going to get better with every rep he takes, but the Mountaineers, I think they got revenge on the brain after they were blown out by Penn State last year. And this is a team that just got better as the season progressed, and especially down the stretch. They whooped up on North Carolina in the bowl game. I like this West Virginia team. Normally you see teams that like West Virginia that overachieve and kind of become the public darling. I think they're still getting disrespected. I think Penn State, like I was talking about, overrated, overvalued. I'm taking West Virginia here with the points. I think they got a great shot to win it outright.
Yeah, Penn State's Nick Singleton, one of my favorite players in the nation because he is electric when he gets the ball. So we'll be watching, out for him. But I do believe, I've been to games in Morgantown before, and I will say this, man, it is a tough building. Next game, we head to the Horseshoe in Columbus as the Ohio State Buckeyes, one of the top-ranked teams in the nation. Big expectations of these guys coming in, playing well. The Akron Zips, not quite the expectations of the Buckeyes this season, but certainly a team that they get a ton of points. So Akron getting north of 7 touchdowns in this thing. Is it enough, Chris?
I don't think it is, and that's what's scary. I mean, this was an Ohio State team that last year, they had a couple of spots where they kind of got caught playing with their food early on. They only beat Youngstown State 35-7, but then came out and beat Western Kentucky 63-10. So it's like, which Ohio State team are we going to see? And I'm kind of tempted to take the under here, but not by much, because it wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State got to this total on their own. But the reason I call them the Akron Zips is because that's probably how many points I expect them to score here. So I just think that this is going to be one that comes close to the number, but I think it comes just under the number. So give me the under between Ohio State and Akron.
Ron?
Yeah, I got to agree. I mean, if Ohio State doesn't cover this number late in the game where they're up big, it's not going to be for lack of trying. I mean, we know Ryan Day is the type of coach that's going to play 4 full quarters. He loves a good blowout. We've seen it in non-conference games before from the Buckeyes. And, like Chris mentioned, they did struggle a little bit in these big favorite roles at the beginning of last year. But I think this is a spot where it's just too much. I think Ohio State puts up 60, maybe 70 points. We've seen them put up 70-plus points in these non-conference games before, and I think they cover the number.
Well, I think, the hot seat here is on Ryan Day this year to win now. We've seen him take some bad losses, and then when you start racking up losses to Michigan and you're the head coach of Ohio State, that is not a good place to be. So if you come out of the gate stuttering against a team like Akron, all you're going to hear is a lot of whispers. Ohio State's got some tough games on the schedule, including Oregon, who last time they played them absolutely knocked the snot out of them. So it's, Ryan Day, the pressure is on. And like these guys said, what you have are just individual mismatches across the board. I think Akron has certainly improved. I mean, we saw that in their one win last year against a tough Central Connecticut State team. But I think that, I think the Zips probably play hard. I just don't think it's hard enough because I think the players that Ohio State sees in practice each week is better than what they're going to see on the other side of the field this week. I don't love the quarterback play at Ohio State. I love Henderson at running back. My guess is he only plays a half or so in this game. I think that's the only way that Akron covers, but I think we might see Ohio State up by 7 touchdowns at the half. So this is just one of those games where if you don't bet it and lay the 50 points, you might even almost regret it. Of course, when it comes to betting on college football, I always bet with my head and not with my heart. It's tough not to in some of these spots, but here comes my team, the Miami Hurricanes, trying to have a comeback type season, get back onto the national stage, and a lot of pressure on Mario Cristobal in this game, but a lot of pressure on the other side of the field as well. Chris, we head to the Swamp as the Florida Gators take on the Miami Hurricanes in what used to be an annual matchup.
Gotta go with Miami in this one. I like the moves that the Canes made in the offseason. They brought in Cam Ward, and I think now Miami can have a little bit more confidence at the quarterback position. And I also got Damian Martinez that came over from Oregon State. For me, this Miami Hurricanes team I have penciled into the ACC title game. Florida, they still got some solid pieces as well. Graham Merson, experienced quarterback, but I think in the end, I think this line is just a little bit light. I have Miami winning this one by at least a touchdown. Yeah, going into Gainesville can be tough, but I don't think it should be a problem for Miami in this one. I'm going to lay the small number with the Canes in this one.
Ron?
Should be a great game. I can't wait for it. Now, when you look at this matchup, you see Florida last couple of years, they've been pretty lousy. Didn't even make a bowl game last year, but they still have their signature home win. We saw it against Utah a couple seasons ago as a dog, against Tennessee last year. That was, I think, a top 10 ranked Tennessee team, or I think they were 11th going into that game. Florida at home in the Swamp with 80, 90 plus thousand people. For a guy like Cam Ward, who played in the Pac-12, nothing like this in terms of the road games that he played, in my opinion. And when you look at his team's play offensively when he was on the road at Washington State, they didn't really do too much. I think he struggles to get the passing game going early. I think Florida, Graham Mertz, he was miserable at Wisconsin. He took big strides last year in Florida. He's got some competitive, a battle brewing with DJ Lagway. I think the Gators, even without Montrell Johnson, have enough here to pull off the upset, if you want to call it one, but it should be a great game.
I love my Canes, and I think this game is going to be a lot closer than people think. I talk a big game, but as Ron pointed out, Florida usually has some landmark wins and even some landmark close games. Even Munson was able to pull off a real close one against Alabama that he ended up losing, but still, it was a tough one in the Swamp. Definitely not an easy building, but I do believe that Miami does have the experience and talent level here, and I also do like I know that both these teams are super athletic. Because of Florida's record, last year, a lot of people are downplaying the amount of talent that they have, but this team is absolutely stacked. And these are two of the fastest teams in the nation. And I expected to see a little bit of a track meet. And that's where I think Cam Ward's mobility should make the difference here. Because I think Mertz might have some trouble with that Miami pass rush. I expect to see Bain get some penetration there and wreak some havoc. I think it's a lot closer than people think. But I'll lay the points here with Miami. But I know Ron is a Florida graduate. I'm, of course, a diehard Miami fan, so we'll both be tuned into this one. Chris, kind of the man in the middle in this particular game. We head to Lincoln, Nebraska, where the Nebraska Cornhuskers take on UTEP. Now, Nebraska starts a freshman QB. Lots of talk about, this incoming quarterback. And, of course, a lot of talk from the coaching staff about the price of quarterbacks in the portal and the price of bringing in a quarterback. Then they went out and brought in probably the most expensive freshman quarterback in this new era that we play in college football. I'd say the expectations in Nebraska are a lot bigger than we've seen in quite some time.
Yeah, I read somewhere somebody said Nebraska was the best 5-win team in college football last year, and it's tough to disagree with that because they only had 5 wins, but of their 7 losses, 5 of those 7 were by 1 score. They played in a lot of close games that just didn't go their way, especially down the stretch last year. And even at Colorado, when the final score was 36-14, it was a closer game at the beginning of it. So I think Nebraska is much improved this year, especially offensively. I think their defense last year was excellent. 18 points per game given up. Great run defense. I think it's going to be stout yet again. UTEP, a new look, new coach. I think it's going to take some time for that program to get going. I like Nebraska in an absolute blowout.
I'm going to take UTEP plus the points. I think I'll believe it when I see it from Nebraska. I think Nebraska has enough to win this game, but they have a coach that's known for winning a lot of close games. Even when he had the big year at Baylor, those games were close. There was not a lot of blowouts there, and just around 4 touchdowns. I'm going to take a shot with UTEP. I think Nebraska, probably a program finally headed in the right direction. I think some of these programs, these historically good programs, the Nebraskas, the Miamis, the Oklahomas, college football is more fun when these teams are good. And I think, having a good Nebraska program with one of the strongest and largest fan bases on the planet will make the game more fun. I think this game might not be as fun for them, but I think they'll eke out a win. But I'll take UTEP plus the points. Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take UTEP plus the points, but not by much. I think 27.5, 28, where I've seen this number, I think that's about right. I could see this game being like a 34-10, 34-7 kind of game. I'm excited to see what Dylan Raiola brings to the table for Nebraska. I think the Cornhuskers are going to be a team that I'm going to keep my eye on this season. Definitely a team that I think is going to take a step in the right direction this season. But for me, 4 touchdowns with the relative unknown in Raiola's first game. I got to think that this is just a little bit too big of a number for my liking. So I'm going to take UTEP plus the points in a lean.
UTEP Frisco Bowl winners a year ago. This would be a great way to start the season, following up on that bowl win. They could go into Lincoln. It would be a shocker for opening college football Saturday, that's for sure. For our next game, we head to Texas, where the Texas Longhorns, fresh off of their appearance in the college football playoff last year, back when it was a 4-team playoff, and a pretty big season for Steve Sarkisian and the Horns, start their season by taking on Colorado State. Is it a trappy-looking spot here for Texas with their big game at Michigan next week? Or do they just come out, take care of business, hang a half 100 on them, and put the scrubs in, as Barry Switzer used to say? Chris, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that Colorado State has a shot to keep this one a lot closer than maybe a lot of folks think. You look at what Texas did last year in that run to the college football playoff. They had early season games where they were laying 35.5, 30.5 against Rice and Wyoming, and didn't cover in either of those games. Here, you take on a Colorado State team that's got a solid offense. We saw Colorado State put up some points in bunches last year. I like Braden Fowler, Nicolosi, and Torrey Holton, that combination for the Rams. And like you said, there's also a prime look-ahead spot for Texas with Michigan on deck. I think Colorado State can at least keep this one respectable. So I'm going to take the Rams and that boatload of points.
I like Colorado State as well. They have a returning quarterback. That's always a good thing to have. And I think Texas, a little bit more pressure on them. And I think, what they're going to try and do is avoid some sort of quarterback situation there, because you've got an incumbent in Quinn Ewers, and then you've got Arch Manning. And it's kind of like, any little mistake that Ewers makes, they're going to be calling for Arch Manning. And with that game at Michigan next week, just a lot of pressure on this Texas team. You got to feel that Sarkisian's going to put the most pressure on himself and trying to keep this team as healthy as possible. Obviously not the same Michigan team that won a national championship a year ago, but might not be the same Texas team that made it to the playoff last year either. So I'll take the points with Colorado State, in one that I probably won't be rushing to the window to bet. But Ron?
Yeah, Colorado State in 2022 scored just 13 points per game, but they were able to double that in 2023, scoring 26. I still think they make strides offensively this year. I still think it's going to be enough, though, in this game. I think that Colorado State's offense is a little bit too one-dimensional. Don't think they do too much on the ground in this one. I think their defense still has a lot of question marks, especially in the secondary. I think we see a lot of big passing plays from Texas in this one, put up a lot of points in a hurry, and I think they actually cover this number, even though it looks, 32.5 points. Colorado State, we saw them compete against teams like Colorado last year. I think Texas still wins this game by 5 touchdowns plus.
But, when it comes to college football and these opening weekends, we know that Texas can start running downhill on you because they certainly have a track team, and that's the one thing to worry about. But on the other side, we saw Colorado State battle it out against Colorado on a weekday last year in a game that nobody gave them a chance in. Next up, we head to Tuscaloosa, where the Alabama Crimson Tide take on Western Kentucky. Of course, Tide, new head coach there, and replacing Nick Saban, who was there for a while. The Tide have had a lot of coaches throughout the years. Some, they've gone through stretches with some not so successful runs before Nick Saban got there. So it'll be interesting to see how it does all play itself out, especially in this playoff era, and especially with the expectations so high. I'll tell you what, they got more names of coaches on that stadium and field there in Alabama. I can't even keep up with them anymore. Ron, what are you thinking for this game?
Yeah, I really like what Helton's done at Western Kentucky last 5 years. We know the quarterback play has been, really great with Bailey Zappi and Austin Reed. I think their offense does enough here. I mean, the Western Kentucky defense has not been great the last few years, but Alabama's offense at times last season wasn't as potent as we're used to seeing. I think Western Kentucky scores enough to cover this number, so I'm going to take the points. A lot of points here at Western Kentucky.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Alabama here. I just think that Kalen DeBoer's got something going here with Alabama. He's been able to bring in some of his guys. He's got a great quarterback in Jalen Milroe that I think is only going to get better with time. And for me, it's just I saw last year Alabama, and I know it was with Nick Saban, but Alabama just has a tendency of winning a lot of these early season games, these week one games, fairly convincingly. Western Kentucky had problems defensively last year, stopping nosebleeds at times. So I think Alabama comes out firing in week one. I think they get the job done. I'm going to lay the points with Bama here.
I'll take a shot here with Western Kentucky in the points. I think Alabama wins. I think they win pretty comfortably, but I think Western Kentucky might even set up for one of the first miserable backdoor covers of the season type games, because I think DeBoer is a good coach, and we saw him do it at Washington. But as Chris was pointing out, Nick Saban was a great coach. In a lot of those games, that he had, the thing where Nick Saban was at his very best, if you gave him a month to prepare. And I think, that we haven't really seen from DeBoer. It certainly didn't look like it in the playoffs as much. And, I just think here, as opening day at Alabama, I think this might be a heartbreaker for some of these people thinking that it's going to be a walkover for the Crimson Tide. Should be an interesting day, though, for sure, in this particular game. I think that 7 o'clock Eastern time start probably helps Western Kentucky more than it hurts. For our next game, we head to the Big House in Michigan, the home of the defending national champion Michigan Wolverines. Jim Harbaugh was originally the honorary captain for this game. Not anymore, but certainly have a Michigan team and a crowd that's certainly going to be up for it, with Fresno State coming to town, the Bulldogs. Michigan loves a good blowout. They love to beat up on the bad teams, and they certainly do not usually schedule up in the out of conference early season games. We see other Big Ten teams do schedule up, but Michigan rarely one of those. But they do have the Texas Longhorns coming in next week. This could be a little bit of a look ahead spot. Ron, what are you thinking for this one?
Yeah, I think Fresno State's a live dog here as well. I think Michigan still wins the game, but I'd take the points with Fresno. I think last year this was a solid team, and injuries kind of derailed their end of the year. But I think this year, Michigan, they have to replace a lot. We mentioned the coaching staff, the quarterback play. I think you could argue Michigan, one of the thinnest teams at the quarterback position in the Big Ten this year. And for me, I think they're just going to struggle to score some points early in this game. I like Fresno plus the points. Getting more than 3 touchdowns now at 21.5. I think there's value there.
I could see this line going higher, to be honest with you, and I think it's going to be the public pushing it in that direction the closer we get to game time. And I think that the higher the points go, like Ron said, the more attractive Fresno State's going to get. I think this is one of these games where I think Michigan might be bogged down for field goals. They can definitely run the football. They always have a big offensive line. They always have strong defensive line. But Fresno, a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, underrated, and always a pretty tough fan base too. I think we saw the Dogs just cover games last week, and I think this is one of the spots, maybe a little doggy as well. I think, the world is going to be on Michigan in this game. Usually if the world's on one side, I like to be on the other. Chris?
Yeah, I think actually my favorite play here is the under. Fresno State didn't face a defense anywhere close to what Michigan's going to bring to the table. And while there is turnover, you still have a really, really solid defensive unit in Ann Arbor. So I think Fresno State could struggle here. But like you guys alluded to, there's just a lot of turnover on offense for Michigan as well. I'm not sold on the quarterback play, the running back play for Michigan. I think this could be a bit of a struggle early on. And we saw last year, even when Michigan had a much better offense, they struggled to put up points against East Carolina. UNLV was only 35-7. I say only because you probably expect them to win by 50 plus in that thing. So I'm going to go with the under here. I think it's just going to be a bit of a lower scoring slugfest in this one, and comes in under the total.
Certainly will be an interesting one. And, I think that a lot of these ones involving these playoff teams, especially like we said about the Texas game earlier and this one, with these two teams playing against each other next week, not going to be a lot of, leaving the starters out there if you don't have to. And that always sets up for backdoors. Next up, we got another one of the big games on Saturday opening weekend. It's Texas A&M at College Station hosting Notre Dame. Of course, Notre Dame plays those these ACC teams in the schedule. They play, USC every year, who's now a Big Ten team. So Notre Dame has a very tough schedule this season, and taking on Texas A&M in College Station, one of the great places to see a college football game. Certainly no easy task, and Notre Dame, well, highly regarded coming into this season, and the expectations through the roof. And I haven't seen any projections that don't have them in the playoff. Up here against Texas A&M, who's actually favored in this one. Chris, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I another one where I kind of struggled, went back and forth on it, but I think I got to go with Texas A&M here. Do I love Connor Weigman as a starting option? No, but we've seen Riley Leonard, even though he's got plenty of experience, he's also had issues in big games and spots. And I just think College Station going to be too much. It should be a great game. Texas A&M, Notre Dame, two of the premier programs in the country. But in the end, I think Texas A&M, especially defensively, is going to be too much for Notre Dame here. I'm going to take Texas A&M in this one.
Ron?
Yeah, excellent game like Ruffalo mentioned. I think I got to make the same point I made it with Cam Ward and his road games at Washington State. Riley Leonard returning from a big injury. When you look at his games, his step-up games on the road, his offenses didn't fare too well. And at Texas, at Kyle Field, the Aggies, this is going to be one of the toughest places to play in college football. This is another program playing with a chip on its shoulder, a team and a program that has a lot of pride that hasn't really been the best the last couple of years, but we know their defense is stacked. I think Notre Dame struggles, and it's not just Riley Leonard in terms of the lack of experience on the road. It's also Notre Dame in general in these step-up games under Freeman. They have folded every time as well. I think Texas A&M's defense is too much. I like the Aggies to win this game and cover the number.
I'm going to take the points here with Notre Dame. I think this game is going to be a close one. I think it's going to come down to the end. I think Notre Dame has a solid chance to win this game outright. We haven't seen Texas A&M really step up to the plate in any of their games in recent years. Of course, new head coach. And the thing is like when you fire Jimbo Fisher and you eat $10 million a year like Texas A&M did, that means you really are committed to winning, and you're going to put that above, the actual education of the students at the university at $10 million a year. But the thing is that football's financed a different way this year, so who the heck even knows how that all plays out. But the thing is, Marcus Freeman kind of gets his guys to believe in doing his thing, and I think this game is one of those type of games. It's kind of, you're going to get your uniform dirty, there's going to be some hitting, and it's all going to come down to one or two plays in the entire game, maybe three, and I think Notre Dame makes two of the three, and I think that's going to be the difference in this game. I think it's going to be a tight one. They've got it right in prime time. They want a tight game. They're going to get a tight game, and having those points in our back pocket, always a good place to be, even if it doesn't look like it's that many at a field goal. So, definitely one of the games I'm more looking forward to seeing. Of course, me and my Labrador Retriever Sam will be on the couch all day watching college football, and I might have to do a live halftime or something during one of these games just to try and stay awake. We close out the Saturday night action as we head to Arizona State, where the Sun Devils take on Wyoming. Wyoming, a team that, doesn't really get a ton of ink and a ton of credit, but actually they seem to still be a program that competes and is on the rise, and we see them every year in these type of spots, kind of standing up and making a name for themselves. Ron, do you think this is a year that Wyoming gets it done?
I think so. I think it's rather telling that the spread is below a touchdown. I think Wyoming, I mean, this is a program on the rise. They've made 3 straight bowl games in the last 3 seasons. It's not going to be easy replacing Peasley at quarterback, but I think the offensive line and the running back group is really deep for this team. I think they're going to be able to move the ball on the ground, and that's what I'm looking for in a lot of these road dogs in week 1. Can they move the ball on the ground? I think Whaley is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher if he can stay away from the injury bug. And I think Wyoming wins this game outright. I'm going to take the points just in case. But Arizona State, I haven't really been impressed with this program in the last few years. We know there's been a lot of player changes the last couple of years, especially at the skill position. But I think Wyoming wins this one.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm going to take Wyoming in the points as well. I'm also going to look at the under. I just don't know where the points are going to come from for Arizona State. I don't like the makeup of this offense. I don't like the makeup of this team in general. Wyoming, I still have question marks about Evan Svoboda at quarterback, but I still think that Wyoming, usually a team that can ride their strong defense to get the job done. And I think it's going to be a close game, low-scoring game, and wouldn't be surprised if Wyoming won the game outright either. So give me Wyoming in the points with the under.
I think with Chris, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game, and I think in these low-scoring games, you generally want to take the points. I haven't given out a total on this show yet, but I think the under would be my play here, at least my stronger play. We've seen Wyoming in these step-up spots almost every single year. Sometimes they step up, sometimes they don't, but normally they're at least competitive with a pretty strong defensive effort. But one thing that you can't really emphasize enough is just how bad Arizona stinks in recent years. I mean, they have been absolutely terrible. What a great big name program they are. What a great history they have. Some great players. I mean, just all-timers in almost every sport, Dave Winfield and Reggie Jackson. And, it goes on and on and on. But, at the same time, we haven't seen those guys or anything close to it in quite some time. I'm going to have to take that under in this one. I'm going to lean to Wyoming as well. But I think Arizona State is one of these programs that, if I had to do it all again and go to school, I wouldn't think twice about going to Arizona State, man. I would love to go to college there, that's for sure, regardless of how good or bad their football team is. Our final game for today's and this week's video is going to be a big one. It happens on Sunday night. It is a primetime matchup, 7:30 Eastern time, as the USC Trojans, first year in the Big Ten, taking on the LSU Tigers, who have played in these type of spots almost every year at the beginning of the season for at least the last several years. It's been Florida State a couple times in there. But, here the Tigers are in this one. Brian Kelly versus Lincoln Riley. Two coaches who have kind of been to the mountain but haven't climbed to the mountaintop, but they certainly get paid like they've climbed more than a mountain or two. Ron, what are you thinking for this particular matchup?
I love the analogy there, but I'm going to go with the over here. I think we're going to see a shootout. I think when you look at Lincoln Riley defenses, they have not been great over the last couple of years. LSU, they have a lot to replace offensively, including Daniels at quarterback, but I still think their offense is going to be maybe not just as potent, but pretty close. I mean, this team scored 46 points per game. Daniels was a big reason for it, but they also ran the ball 6 yards per carry. Their offensive line, one of the best in the country. This is a steep total already, 64 points. I don't think it's steep enough. I'm going to go over.
I'm going to roll with LSU in this thing. I think laying the 4.5 points, it might seem like a steep number in this game for a USC team that probably is able to put points on the board. But I haven't seen the Lincoln Riley defense tackle anybody. And I think, when you look at the other side of this equation, while LSU and Brian Kelly teams in general, not necessarily known for their defenses, this is an SEC defense. And that is a big difference from the Pac-12 where USC has lived for the last several years. I understand they're a Big Ten team now, but they haven't played in a Big Ten game yet. So I think the LSU with that defense is just going to be good enough to get it done. Once again, that receiver room at LSU just looks like an NFL team. Chris?
Yeah, I think I got to go with Ron with the over here. I just see two teams that are go offensively and can be nothing short of a sieve defensively as well. We saw a bunch of high-scoring games between these two teams last year. Lincoln Riley, not necessarily known for prioritizing defense. And, I think this is going to be two teams that have some solid quarterback play that's going to develop. Miller Moss was great in the bowl game last year for USC. Garrett Nussmeier has plenty of experience. So I think that we have some points coming here. I think we've got some fireworks. I'm going to take the over between LSU and USC.
That wraps up this week's college football schedule that we're going to cover on the show. Of course, there's other games out there. We cover those all at pickdogs.com, as well as here in our YouTube channel. We cover a bunch, and we'll be talking about them, of course, on our live shows just about every day of the week. I'm excited for a big college football season, able to spend it with Chris and Ron once again. We'll probably bring in some guest cappers and some other people as the weeks go on. We've got some ideas for this show, but I think week one, just looking at college football in general, I think it's hard enough, right, guys? I mean, it's just you don't have anything to work with. And with the transfer portal these days, and, you know, with guys leaving early, and, you know, the divisional realignment and the 12-team playoff, and, you know, with the clock rules that we saw come in last year, and now with a 2-minute warning, it changes things, you know? It does.
Sure does. I think, you know, it just feels like this week one was tougher to research than years past. And I think you mentioned the transfer portal is one of those reasons, but I don't know. It's going to be, I think after week one, we get some numbers going. Week two, we'll be ready to go and more in-depth analysis. But I'm excited for week one, just as you guys are.
Chris?
Yeah, the transfer portal definitely throws a wrench into things, but it's like anything. Once we get, like Ron said, once we get a baseline of data after a couple of weeks, it's kind of, it becomes a little bit easier after that. And it's going to take some time to get that, but once we get it, this is going to be a spot where we're going to make money hand over fist every single week. So definitely want to be along for the ride.
Well, if anyone's looking for me this college football Saturday, you can find me right on the couch. I'll be watching all these games and be taking notes as to using that data as the season goes on. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Let us know what you think of the new format here at Pick Dogs for our college football show. And like I said, it's a work in progress. We already have some ideas for the coming weeks, but week one, let's get it done.